Hello and welcome to the second video in our beginner scripting series. In this video, we're going to be going over variables and what scopes are, as well as the different scopes. We will also be going over instances, so be sure to stick around. Before we start this video, if you haven't seen our previous video about navigating Studio, I encourage you to watch it. The video link will be in the description.
Roll the intro. What is a scope?
A scope defines where a variable or a function can be seen by other bits of code within your script. Elements such as loops, functions, and conditional statements such as if statements can create a new scope. The local keyword also creates a new scope. The two different types of scope include the global scope and the local scope. To scope something locally, you will need to use the local keyword. On screen, we have a visual aid that includes three different scopes: Scope A, Scope B, and Scope C. Scope A contains a local variable, Scope B contains a local function with a local variable inside the function, and Scope C contains a conditional statement and a local variable. Scope A cannot see anything within the other two scopes, as they're defined locally after Scope A is defined. In other words, Scope B and C are outside the scope of Scope A. Scope B can see everything within its own scope and everything inside Scope A. Again, Scope C is out of reach as it is defined locally and after B's scope is defined. Scope C can see everything in every scope presented, as each scope presented previously is within the scope. A good way to think about this is everything defined before a scope can be read by that scope. Anything defined locally after a scope cannot be read by the scope. To scope something globally, you would define the variable without the local keyword in front. Without the local keyword here, the local variable in scope A would have access to the now global variable. Now it is important to note two things. Globally scoped variables can actually perform 10% slower than locally scoped ones. While this may not affect you right now, it is a good thing to keep in mind for time-sensitive code. The other important thing to note is the syntax of a variable's name. A variable's name can only have alphanumeric characters, which are letters and numbers, and underscores. A variable's name can't start with a number, although there can be numbers anywhere else in the variable's name, so the variable can start with either a letter or an underscore. Here are a few examples of accepted variable names and a couple of not accepted variable names. Okay, so to show you some valid variable names, I am back in Studio. Let's start with only characters found in the alphabet. So let's create a variable called alpha and set it equal to false. It's valid. Alright, now let's try adding a number to the front of the variable name. As you can see, Studio is underlining the variable's name in red. That is because it is an invalid variable name. What if we add an underscore in front of the number? Well, it becomes a valid variable name now. What if we made a variable named alpha1? It is a valid variable name. Any other symbols that you may try to use will also invalidate the variable's name, because again, it can only have alphanumeric characters and underscores. One more thing to note with variable names, you should not use keywords as variable names, as they will overwrite the function of the keyword. In some cases, keywords can't be overridden anyway, so it's extremely good practice to use non-keyword variable names. Let's move on to something known as forward declaration. Forward declaration is when you define a variable without assigning it a value. You assign a value to the variable later on. So let's create a variable called last player to join, and when a player joins, we're going to assign a player value to that variable. So we're going to use the player added event to get the player that joins and assign the player value to the variable we declared earlier in this script. And that is forward declaration in a nutshell.
What is an instance?
Well, when someone's talking about an instance, they're typically referring to an object of a class. Think of a script. That is an instance or object of the script class. Instance is also the base class for all classes in Roblox, including scripts. Some examples of instances include parts, folders, scripts, module scripts, and tools. But as you can see, there are many different types of instances available for you to use. In the next episode of this series, we will talk about different types of loops. Be sure to hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any new videos and subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next video.